An estuary is an area where marine or saltwater meets freshwater, as you see here, and the water that forms in an estuary is known as brackish water. So wherever saltwater and freshwater combine, that area where salinity is higher in parts in the freshwater, that's called brackish water. Mostly they're surrounded by coastal wetlands, and I'm going to talk about their diversity in a minute. If you notice here, we're going to talk about that later. Great. And these are some other terms that you have to familiarize yourself with when you see the words estuaries. You're going to think of river mouths, inlets, bays, sounds, salt marshes, mangrove forests, all those. And again, we're going to talk about that later when we do freshwater biomes. So the diversity of species distributed in a marine biome is as follows. In a coral reef, you have the most species diversity. Second would be in an estuary or coastal wetlands, and third would be in the deep ocean or in the abyssal zone. Familiarize yourself with this chart that comes from your textbook regarding ecological and economical advantages or disadvantages to a marine ecosystem. And try to remember that it's always in reference to you when you see those words. So estuaries have specific roles for the environment, such, number one, you know that they're second on the diversity list, so they are home to a variety of marine species. They also are known for excellent fishing, so for the economy, estuaries increases economical or has economical advantage. It acts as a filter since there's movement and exchange of salinity. It filters and removes pollution, and it also helps stabilize floods and control floods and help control wave impact against shorelines. There's two main types of freshwater biomes. Flowing, which is also called lotic, and standing, which is called lentic. So to go over some of the standing water, and all you have to do is name them: swamps, and they can also be saltwater swamps, so keep that in mind, wetlands, bogs, and marshes, which can also be saltwater. Then you've got ponds, and here it's a little bit different because we're going to talk about light zones with the lakes, because if there's a deep lake, then light zones exist in this lake. And here's an image of those, and I'm going to go over them for you. So the littoral zone, think of lit for light, that's near the shore, and it's shallow, and it's a fully euphotic zone. Light penetrates the entire zone. Consider, if you're going to compare littoral zone to a marine ecosystem, think of it as the coastal zone or intertidal neritic zone. As you swim out, so sunlight penetrates the entire zone, and if you're going to think of plants in this zone, they're terrestrial and aquatic. They can sustain both types of environments, and sometimes they're submerged and sometimes they're emerged, as you see in the picture. And as I mentioned before, compared to intertidal or coastal. Then you've got the limnetic zone, which has depth, so it's kind of like after the drop in the marine ecosystem. And the first zone is euphotic. Light penetrates. Then as you go deeper, you got the twilight or the twinkle zone. And then the deepest part of the lake is known as profundo, which is a Latin word for profundo, means deep. And this is obviously a no light zone, or between twilight and no light zone. And then the floor of the lake is also called the benthic zone. For flowing water, just know for now that you've got rivers and streams, and I'm going to bring this back up when we do the next unit on water. When you look at lakes, you got to take into consideration nutrient value in lakes. An oligotrophic lake is low in nutrients, so the water is clear blue and very little sediment buildup on the bottom. If you move on to mesotrophic, that's where you have, I call it M for middle. Mesotrophic has middle amounts of nutrients, and it also has sediment buildup already occurring on the bottom, and the water becomes a little darker in terms of green hues due to algae growth. Then you've got the eutrophic lake, which is highly, a high amount of nutrients and sediment buildup, and it's shallow, murky water. So the water turns a little darker. And the bottom right, you see a picture of excessively eutrophic lake, which is known as hypereutrophic. And I'm going to talk about that again in a little bit of what leads to this hypereutrophic conditions. I'll talk about threats in a minute.